Well, at one time, Oklahoma had 9 representatives in the U.S. House. Today, we have only 5. And while our state's population has grown, other states' populations have grown faster, which makes this year's census all the more important from a political perspective. Joining me now is Mike Morgan, the former head of the state Senate that also chaired the redistricting in the year 2000. Well, you may not remember this, but I remember covering this all 10 years ago, and there were papers throughout this office that you were in,
Yes.
and it almost looked like a war room.
And I remember thinking when I finished that I'd never have to talk about it again, and here I am, 10 years later.
But it is a very detailed process.
It's a huge process, and of course it's one of the main things the census is used for. We have to comply with the one man, one vote concept that we've always had in our country. And so we have to have equal numbers in all of these districts, not only the congressional districts, but the state Senate districts and the state legislative or House districts. It's got to be very, very exact.
So how does it get done?
Well, it's a long process. Once the census, of course, is done, then the Census Bureau has until, I believe it is April 1st, which will be next year, to give that information to the states so they then can go through the redistricting process. It's different in each state. Some states the legislature does it, some states has a commission, some states the governor is really involved. It depends on the state. But in Oklahoma, the legislature will do that in their regular session next year, which begins in February and must, by Constitution, end in May. So they have a short time to do this, but they're already preparing. They've got the staff, the people on board that are studying, looking at it now. They pretty well know what the numbers are going to be at this point. So what they will do is wait till they get the official numbers and then actually next year do what should be then fine-tuning to the congressional and the legislative districts. One key difference too, Rob, this go-around as opposed to 10 years ago is we expect to keep those 5 congressional seats. We had to reduce one 10 years ago. We went from 6 to 5. That creates quite a headache that they won't have this year.
So when you were redistricting, were you literally putting one side of the street in one district and the other side of the street in the other?
You know, fortunately, it's come a long way, Rob. You know, years ago, they literally had maps on the floor with colored pencils trying to do this. As you can imagine, that's changed a lot with computer programs that have been developed to do this, so you can kind of play with where you put the people. And what we did, and I think they'll do this year, is to try to bring the members of the legislature in to acquaint them with that and let them see how the numbers might work. Each Senate district has to be 71,000 people or thereabouts. Each House district about 34,000 people. Plus or minus 5% is what you get from the federal government on your accuracy. So you got to be close. So it takes a lot of give and take, and it's like putting a big jigsaw puzzle together. You go out on the computer screen and you say, well, what if we went down here? What if we moved over there? But you have to remember the rules. The one man, one vote thing with the number. You can't disenfranchise minorities. That's a big no-no with the federal government. So you can't, you've got to be very mindful of that. And then you've got to be mindful of communities. You don't want to split a community right down the middle if you can avoid that. You like to keep business areas together. Try to keep communities together so that they have the same representatives. And it's really difficult to get that done.
So anyone that's ever gone through a civics class knows the term gerrymandering. Let's
Oh, they
talk
do.
a little bit about the politics of this. Is it an easy place to fall into?
This is probably the place where it's the easiest to fall into political mode. We tried 10 years ago very, very hard not to do that. In fact, my instructions from the pro tem at that time were to do everything possible to keep the politics out because there's a natural urge. A sitting member comes in and he says, you know, I'm a Republican and I've got some great voters up in that north part. I need that. Well, and you know that doesn't fit with his district and you have to really, you really need to put it somewhere else. That presents a tough question. And people are motivated by politics. Let's face it, you know, they want power. They want to be in control. And if you can draw what is a, quote, legislative or a Republican district or a Democratic district, then you've got an advantage. And so it's very important that those in charge, the leadership in the legislature, the governor, and those actually doing the districts, be mindful of putting politics on the back burner. Sometimes they're successful, sometimes they're not.
And all the more reason to take this year's census very seriously.
Absolutely. People just don't understand it is critical to the way we function.
All right, thank you so much, Senator Morgan. Mike Morgan, former president pro tem of the Oklahoma State Senate.